What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my upset alert games heading into Week 6 of the 2025 college football season. Going back to my upset alert games in Week 5 and the last weekend in the month of September, 3 of the 8 games ended up being upsets in that video. Of course, we had the big upset on Friday night, Virginia upsetting Florida State. That one was on the video. And then on Saturday night, we had those 2 big games that ended up being upsets. Alabama, of course, upsetting Georgia, and then, of course, Oregon upsetting Penn State. So those were the 2 big upsets in my opinion, but the biggest upset was definitely Virginia upsetting Florida State. So those were the 3 games from last week going into Week 6. Are we in store for more upsets this weekend as we head into the month of October? Well, we're going to find out. Again, we're taking the 8 games, and I'm picking the 8 games total, 4 games each, that are least likely to be upsets and then most likely upsets. So let's jump right into it. We're going from the least likely upsets and working our way to the most likely upsets, in my opinion. And again, whoever the team is favored, that team is going to be on upset alert. So let's jump right into it. We're going from the least likely upsets, and we'll start here with probably the least likely upset of the weekend, and that is Mississippi State at Texas A&M. This one is at 7:30 Eastern Time on the SEC Network. Texas A&M favored by 14 in this one. That's a pretty high spread there for a SEC game with a conference that's been, all about parity this year. But for Mississippi State, they're coming off a tough loss to, Tennessee last week, and they're also playing on the road. So this is a really tricky place to play. Texas A&M, though, I wouldn't really say they looked pretty good last week. I mean, they didn't look that great against Auburn. Their defense played pretty well, but their offense was kind of sluggish. It wasn't really the same Texas A&M offense that we saw in the Notre Dame game from week number 3. So yeah, Texas A&M I think definitely has a little bit of a little bit to prove here in this game. They're taking on a Mississippi State team that also has a pretty good offense. So maybe this is a game that can go either way. But Texas A&M definitely I think has the more talented team, and Mississippi State has to go on the road to play this game, especially after coming off a very tough, hard-fought game against Tennessee last weekend. So I don't know if I see an upset here playing out, but you never know. Mississippi State probably can come out here and surprise and do pull off the upset here against Texas A&M. But either way, Texas A&M is favored by 14, so by about a couple of touchdowns, and this one will be at 7:30 Eastern Time on the SEC Network. Next up, we go to the Big 12, Texas Tech at Houston. This one is at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN. Surprisingly, Texas Tech is favored by 11.5. I'm really surprised about that spread. Both of these teams are unbeaten, but Texas Tech, they've been pretty impressive so far. Their last win, of course, coming against Utah a couple weeks ago. They're coming off of a bye week. And you look at Houston on the other side. This team is definitely being overlooked. I've been really impressed with Connor Wigman, the quarterback, the transfer from Texas A&M. He has come in here and played pretty well for this Houston team. And I think the last time I watched Houston was probably the Friday night game against Colorado. Yeah, I haven't really watched a ton of, Houston football this year. But this team looks like they could be like a decent team, and they could be among one of those dark horse teams in the Big 12. So even though Texas Tech is favored by 11.5, I think Texas Tech definitely has the more experienced team, and they're definitely probably the more talented team. But it's the Big 12. Anything can happen in this conference. There is a ton of parity in this conference, and anybody can beat anybody. And these teams beat up on each other. So yeah, Texas Tech, I can definitely see them going down in this game, and I could also see Houston pulling off an upset. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if Texas Tech won this game by at least a couple of touchdowns. But you never know. This one could be a good one. So, yeah, keep an eye on this one if you are a Big 12 fan in general. Texas Tech, again, favored by 11.5 in this one. And this game is at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Both teams 4-0, and this one is on ESPN Saturday night. Next up, we have Vanderbilt at Alabama, so we're back in the SEC. Alabama's favored by 10.5. This one will be at 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Alabama coming off that big win against Georgia. I just talked about that a little bit earlier. That was a really good performance by Alabama. I would say second half they were not really that impressive, but their defense did just enough to hold Georgia to, win it by 3 points. They're taking on a Vanderbilt team that is 5-0. Who would have thought Vanderbilt starting 5-0? This program has really turned around around under when Diego Pavia came last year. And this is a Vanderbilt team that beat Alabama last season. So it was one of the biggest shockers of last season. It was Vanderbilt beating Alabama. That was definitely the biggest shocker in all of college football last year. Can they make it 2 in a row? I don't know. I mean, Alabama's favored by 10.5. I kind of feeling that Alabama's going to come out motivated in this one. I know they beat Georgia last week, and that's a big win, but you got Alabama that definitely wants to be motivated, especially after losing to Vanderbilt last year, and they definitely want to really contain Diego Pavia at the quarterback position. So, yeah, I think Vanderbilt definitely is capable of pulling off an upset here, but at the same time, we could see a pretty angry Alabama team in this one, and this looks like a different Alabama team compared to the Week 1 loss to Florida State. The last 2 games they have played pretty well, so I'm expecting Alabama to be pretty dominant in this game, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Vanderbilt did pull off another upset for the second year in a row. And again, it's Alabama, at home, and they're favored only by 10.5, which is not a big number, and this one is at 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Next up, we got Illinois at Purdue. This one is at noon Eastern Time on the Big Ten Network. Illinois favored by 8.5 in this one. Illinois is coming off a pretty big win against USC with a game-winning field goal. They finally got back on track after losing, to Indiana 63-10 a couple of weeks ago. This Illinois team looks like they could be a pretty solid football team. I was kind of giving up on them, especially after losing to Indiana. I was calling them, maybe overrated, but after that win over USC, they could be a little bit underrated again. But, they're heading on the road here to Purdue, which, Purdue is not a great team, let's be honest. Yeah, they're 2-2, but they really haven't impressed me so far. I haven't really watched them a lot this year, so I don't really know what Purdue looks like. I know they lost to USC by a couple of touchdowns, and they also got blown out by Notre Dame. I think they won their first 2 games in a row, and they've lost their last 2, and I think they're actually coming out of a bye week, so maybe they had some time to prepare for this game, and maybe they can pull off an upset here. But either way, I don't know if I see it happening, especially after what Illinois did last week. Maybe that, win over USC really carries their momentum, and they could be a very underrated team at the end of the year. So, yeah, Purdue definitely very capable of pulling off an upset, but, Illinois is favored by 8.5. They should be the better team here and the more experienced team as well. And again, this one will be at noon Eastern Time on the Big Ten Network. Next up, we go to Virginia at Louisville. This one is at 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN2. And surprisingly, even though Virginia is the ranked team, Louisville is favored by 7. That is a very high number for a, Virginia team that's coming off a big win against Florida State last week. I don't understand why they're making them a 7-point, underdog in this one. I mean, Virginia is definitely capable of pulling off an upset. Don't get me wrong. Maybe it's because Louisville's playing at home and they're probably the more better team. But if you look at Louisville's schedule, they really haven't been tested except last week. I mean, they beat Pittsburgh. That was barely a win for Louisville. They had to come back from behind in that game, I believe, there for the Cardinals. So, yeah, I haven't watched a ton of Louisville football this year. I don't know if this is a top 25 team. They really have to prove it probably in this game against Virginia. Virginia looks like a pretty solid football team on the other side. They got a pretty good quarterback, and this is a really well-coached team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Virginia does win this game. It would be a big upset if Virginia did beat Louisville here on the road. But at the same time, Virginia is the ranked team, so maybe that's kind of considered an upset. But at the same time, I think, Virginia definitely, if they win this game, it's really considered a big upset. So, yeah, Louisville favored by 7 in this one. This one was at 3:30 Eastern Time on Saturday on ESPN2. Definitely keep an eye on this one. Virginia definitely capable of pulling off back-to-back upsets in back-to-back weeks here in the college football season. Next up, Texas at Florida, back in the SEC. This one is at 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Texas favored by 6.5. Both of these teams are pretty similar. They're both coming off of bye weeks from this past weekend. For Texas, the last time we saw them was against Sam Houston. That was a big win for them, but, Texas definitely hasn't played their best game in my opinion. And then for Florida, they haven't really, they've had a tough schedule this year. Let's face it. They've lost to LSU and Miami in those big games, and then they lost to South Florida in week 2, which obviously was a shocker because they were definitely the better team going into that game. But you look at Florida, it's really just the amount of mistakes that they've made this year. If they don't make mistakes, Florida definitely could be like, sitting at, maybe 4-0 perhaps, or maybe like 3-1, or even like 2-2. So, yeah, for Florida, they're definitely going to have to eliminate those mistakes here in this game. Texas, though, they haven't played their best game yet, and they also haven't had really a big test since the Ohio State game. So, yeah, I think Florida definitely capable of pulling off an upset. They're playing at home, and with Texas not playing their best game so far this year, yeah, Texas definitely could be in trouble. And if they lose this game, I think Texas could be out of that playoff conversation before too long. So, yeah, keep an eye on this one. Texas definitely on upset alert here for this weekend. Again, this game will be at 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. And Texas favored by 6.5 in this one. Next up, Miami at Florida State. So we're back in the ACC. This one is at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. So this is the primetime ABC game. Miami favored by 4.5. So I think this is where College Game Day was supposed to go down, but after Florida State losing to Virginia, maybe that's why they decided to go to Tuscaloosa instead for Alabama and Vanderbilt. How does Florida State bounce back, especially after losing to Virginia? Maybe they were overlooking Virginia and they were looking ahead to this rivalry game against Miami, because sometimes that can happen. Teams overlook lesser opponents and they look ahead to either like a big rivalry game or even like a top 5 team. So you look at Miami, they haven't played a game since, like the win over Florida. That was like back on September the 20th, I believe. So they haven't played, probably a, big game since like the Notre Dame win. So yeah, this will definitely be a really tough game here for Miami. I think Florida State definitely capable of pulling off an upset because it's a rivalry game. But at the same time, is Florida State going to come in focus? Which Florida State team is going to show up? Is it going to be the Florida State Seminole team that we saw in week 1 against Alabama? Was that Alabama game just a fluke, or was it for real? And then if they show up against, Miami like they did against Virginia, then yeah, Florida State probably does get beat in this one. But at the same time, it's a rivalry game. Anything can go in this matchup. But again, Miami is favored by 4.5, and this one is on ABC at 7:30 Eastern time. And then finally, probably the most likely upset of the weekend, even though the ranked team is not even favored, it's Iowa State at Cincinnati. This one will be at noon Eastern time on ESPN2. Cincinnati again favored by 0.5 point. It's a pretty close spread there. You got Iowa State, that's ranked number 14th in the AP poll, and they are the underdog in this game. So by 0.5 point, Iowa State, even though they're ranked, they're like a 0.5 point underdog, which is not really big, obviously. I mean, I've seen that spread go back and forth at like 2.5 and then maybe 0.5 point, and then I saw Iowa State was probably, favored by like 2.5. But either way, this one is going to be pretty much a good one here. Cincinnati, I think it would definitely be a big upset if they were to beat Iowa State because, the Cyclones are undefeated. They're 5-0. They're ranked number 14th in the AP poll. But at the same time, Cincinnati is on upset alert because they are the favorite. So, yeah, for Cincinnati, they're coming off a big win against Kansas last week. I'll be honest, I haven't watched the Bearcats since their week 1 win against, their week 1 loss in Nebraska, I should say, where they lost by 3. So they were actually really competitive in that game back in week 1, so maybe Cincinnati could be a pretty good football team if they do pull off some sort of upset here against Iowa State. For Iowa State, they really haven't proven to us maybe they're a top 15 team. I mean, they're probably, going to be a pretty good team because they're already 5-0, but at the same time, they looked pretty good against Arizona last week, and I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa State did win this game as well. But either way, this is a Big 12 game, and like I mentioned with Texas Tech and Houston earlier, I mean, anything can happen in this conference. These teams are going to beat up on each other, and there may not be any more undefeated teams up to this point pretty soon. So again, Cincinnati is favored by 0.5 point, so they're definitely on upset alert. But for Iowa State, it would definitely be a big upset because they're the ranked team, and they're also undefeated. So this is probably the most likely upset, in my opinion, to happen this weekend. What do you guys think? Does an upset here happen as well? But those are all my upset alert games heading into Week 6 of this 2025 college football season. Give me your upset alert games, and also, what do you think about these 8 games? Who do you see going down this weekend? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.